SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader.
If you just joined us, good afternoon to you and welcome. Elaine Proctor is a debut novelist, and her book Rhumba is a story of Flambeau's search for his mother through the streets of London and beyond. Flambeau is a Congolese boy. His mother kind of tricked him into being allowed to be sent to London because they need to survive. It's kind of tough, to say the very least, in the Eastern DRC. And when he gets to London, he stays with his mom's sister's family, and they're not very nice to him. And he's waiting for his mother to come to London. He's a baby. He's 9. And because his mom's sister fails to help him, he also befriends Knight, who is a sapper. He's like a bit of a sort of gangster type of guy, very flashy, dresses well. And Knight is dating a Scottish girl, I think. She's Scottish, ne? Eleanor, who hates her name. Shame. Eleanor has got self-esteem issues from here to high heaven. You'd think for a child who's been raised by a school teacher and comes from a kind of loving family, although her dad is an alcoholic, and, you know, before he's even called in his grave, this man moves in with his mother and makes her miserable. So, you know, her relationship with her mom is sort of broken and her father's dead. Anyway, Flambeau, this guy, Knight, agrees to help Flambeau find his mother. And, you know, they become this weird kind of family. And obviously, you know, so you have these immigrants into London. So there's this issue of foreignness. You've got African people who are trying to find a life for themselves, but still maintain a sense of who they are. And of course, you've got this Rhumba, which is the big theme, because that's how Flambeau and Knight come to find each other, this common ground. And of course, Flambeau's love for Rhumba is part of the memory of his mother, because his mother was a great dancer. And it's been written by Elaine Proctor, and you're born in South Africa.
Yes.
Welcome to SAFM Literature.
Thank you.
What a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Why did it take you this long to write a novel?
I had written, my creative life actually began making political documentaries here in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I went to film school to learn how to make fiction. And I wrote and directed 3 feature films, all of which had a kind of South African focus, or Southern African focus. And then the last film I made, so I was very happy writing film, and I loved making films. I didn't love getting the films made. It was definitely watering down the nub of the story in almost every instance to try and raise the funding to make it. And so the final film that I made was in the Namibian desert. It was called Kin, and it was a very tough experience, incredibly hot, incredibly difficult to make. And my then 3-year-old daughter was bitten by a snake in the middle of the desert, which I referred to actually in Rhumba.
Flambeau was bitten by a snake as well.
He was. And I just kind of recognized, I think, that I couldn't be a good mother to my children and make very difficult independent films. And I couldn't bear the idea that Rhumba wouldn't exist as a story, because by then I had fallen in love with the characters and was hopelessly committed. So I chose to write it as a novel instead of try and make it as a film. And I'm very pleased I did.
Now, your novel shows a great deal of sort of in-depth knowledge of Congolese society. Did you spend any time there yourself?
You know, here's my experience of the Congo. I grew up in South Africa in the bad old days without being able to travel to the continent beyond, you know, the few frontier states.
Yeah.
And I developed such a sort of hunger for it. It was this sort of forbidden other. So I read my way through the continent as a sort of late teenager. And a lot of the literature that was inspired by the Congo, albeit in the Western canon, I found most compelling.
Yes.
And so I longed to go there and learn about it. And when I was invited to develop a project with a film company in London after my snake experience, I asked them if I could work on a film in the Congo, and they said, sure you can, but you can't go there because we don't have any budget. So I then started to explore how much of a Congolese presence there was in the city of London. And it was an astonishing number of people. And so I did 6 months of very, very intimate research, starting first with the history, both of the colonial period and more recently, and then branched out into finding organizations and institutions that were in some way connecting with the Congolese diaspora as it was occurring in London, and then slowly began to develop personal relationships with people within that community. And so for about 6 months, pretty much hung out there. And the paradox is that when I was finally able to go to the Congo, I had found the story of Flambeau and his mother already. And I felt that if I had gone to the Congo, this was with Human Rights Watch to go to the East, which is a very extreme experience.
It's a difficult place.
Very. And I sort of felt that this tenuous, intimate, small story would just be blown out of the water by going there.
And the big political narrative and the story of the war.
Yes.
Because sometimes history does just cast this huge shadow over people's personal stories, and you want the story to come out of the history.
Absolutely.
But not to be overwhelmed by it. Elaine Proctor is author of Rhumba, which is a novel set in the east of London, and it tells the story of Congolese immigrants and how they navigate their way through the society that they find themselves in. And I mean, I found myself because I did a story on. I spoke to a refugee, this gentleman. He runs the refugee help desk in Yeovil, and he is from the DRC, and he took me to it's like a little Kinshasa basically, where they organize transport if you need to travel and you want to send stuff home, or and it's the local food. So we did have the pondu and the salt fish and cassava and all that wonderful food. And of course for me also, I used French as a way to connect with other African people, and you get these stories of also trying to understand the immigrant condition without problematizing it, over problematizing it, and without having too much rhetoric around it and being too PC about it. Did you feel any of that anxiety when you're telling a story about these people, considering that you are outside of where they come from?
I think that I definitely felt it, and I suppose that drove my the level of intensity that I undertook the project with, because I was very aware that it was a big story. It wasn't my story, and I needed to know it very well and make it authentic and credible. But what I felt saved me from the idea of the political incorrectness of my even daring to take the story on was there was a certain moment in the research. I wasn't even sure that I was going to come out of that research with a story, but there was a certain moment in it when, rather mysteriously, I just was aware that there was a smudge on my consciousness that was the beginning of something very human and tender. And if I just knew that if I stuck with that and I built credible lives around that kernel, and essentially the kernel is the love between a mother and her son, and the love between three fantastically vulnerable people.
They are vulnerable.
So vulnerable.
How did you get Knight's character? Because guys like Knight are very difficult to decode, just generally, because they've had to be slippery in order to survive. I mean, here's a young man who grew up on the slums of Kinshasa. His mother died of AIDS, and he's had to hustle his way into the UK. So how were you able to decode that kind of slippery character and still give him an intense sense of humanity, where he's not just a thug because he chose to be a bad guy? He's not a bad guy.
No. I mean,
even though he steals checks.
Yes, he steals checks, and also he, occasionally helps traffickers, bring people here and there. I mean, he does bad things.
How he sold that Sudanese woman Fatima into prostitution.
Yeah, it's devastating. But actually, he really interests me because he's the most damaged of all of them. And in a quite sort of iconic, classic way, he is also the one in the best position to redeem them all. And so there's a kind of an iconic doorway that I felt I had to go through with somebody as extreme as Knight. And that I loved him.
I love Knight. I mean, he's a bad boy, but I love him.
Yes, and that beautiful thing, you know, I was reading the other day about the definitions of the classic dandy, because a sapeur is like a dandy.
Yes.
You know, the outside is absolutely signed, sealed, and delivered. Gripping beauty, you know. And Baudelaire has this beautiful definition where he says, a dandy is somebody who simply wears gorgeous things on the outside to illuminate the beauty of his mind and his soul. And I just thought, you know, in a place like the Congo where there's such extreme pain and such extreme violence and such a terrible colonial history, that being a dandy is not the worst thing in the world. Being a murderer, you know, being a
those soldiers.
Soldier without soul is irredeemable in my view. But being a damaged person trying to make beauty out of pain is not.
Elaine Proctor is author of Rhumba. It is her first novel and it's remarkable. Taking your calls if you'd like to say hello on 0891 104207. Also if you have any questions. Your SMS is 34701 at a cost of R2.
SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader.
Elaine Proctor is our guest on SAFM Literature. I'm Karabo Khuleng, and her book is titled Rhumba. Eleanor, that is the third. They're like these birds with broken wings, and you want them to get better. You know, these three characters. But what does Eleanor bring into the story? What were you writing into it by creating this character of Eleanor?
I wanted to get away from a story in which the African characters were broken-winged, and the Western Europeans were all
the white lady who helps them cross the road.
Exactly.
Okay.
Can't have that.
Yeah.
Because that's actually also not real. And so
stereotype.
I was very interested in the kind of... The book does talk a little bit about Eleanor knows bad things. Her father was an alcoholic and her mother didn't love her, essentially. So she doesn't have quite a lot of the nurture that, in fact, Flambeau did have with his mother before she disappeared, and even Knight with his mother before she died. So, in a sense, she becomes broken-winged of a different kind. And I wanted her to really fall in love, which I think I did, actually, in the research, fall in love with characters who knew how hard things could be, but who got up in the morning with a sense of joy and connectedness, who had the capacity
and hope. Because I think that's what they bring to her. This idea that you can hope, that things can be bad, but they don't have to stay that way forever.
Yes.
And it's just amazing. She falls desperately in love with Knight. Shame.
Totally.
She's on some, I'm going to marry this guy.
Well,
and she, she tries to understand him. I mean, she learns the cooking and everything. She really, and she also abets him with his crimes. But what kind of moral compass does she have? Because she does she know that the stuff that they're doing is illegal and she does it anyway? I mean, what's that all about?
Yeah, well, I think the check scam which she helps them with is just about acceptable. Although she does talk about how her father would turn in his grave and her mother would put it in the bank for a rainy day. But I think her biggest crisis is when she finally gets it that Knight is involved in trafficking in some way, superficially perhaps compared to the other guys.
And Deo's not the jolliest of all people.
Deo is an evil fellow.
He is, he's a villain. That guy. I don't want to meet a Deo in my life. Thank you for such a wonderful book. And you'll be in Hyde Park, exclusive books on Tuesday, is that right?
At 6 for 6:30.
6 for 6:30, so you'll get to meet Elaine, get a copy of her book, read it, get it signed. If you're in Cape Town, Book Lounge on Wednesday evening. And she'll be at the Franschhoek Literary Festival next weekend. I'll be there as well, by the way. It begins on Friday until Sunday. If you want to find out more, go to www.flf.co.za. But please get yourselves a copy of Rhumba. It's available for around 194 Rand. And it is published by Quercus and locally by? It's Quercus, yes. Oh, okay. It's all Quercus fiction, and you can get it for around 194 Rand. It's really worth it. Hey? I think it's in the top 3 of the books that I've read so far this year, and I mean it. I mean it. Thanks for joining us on SFM, and well done.
Thank you.
I hope you write some more.
I will. And the next one's South African.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. Looking